Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Monty Hook and I am your host. And today we're going back down the rabbit hole with the lovely Leah Steele. Leah, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. I know we've wanted to connect again for a while. I was doing a little bit of research about what you're up to now and our last conversation. So we spoke, we had the podcast in April 2021. So that was probably at the height of a lot of the nonsense that was happening in the world. Not that the nonsense has gone away or that it's any lower. But yeah, it seemed to be a bit of a peak of chaos at that time, you could say. So yeah, we went down the rabbit hole on different things. What did we talk about last time? Actually, the title of last time was Global Elites, Sovereignty, Cryptocurrencies and Industries for the New Earth. And then the note that we had on Spotify, etc., was Leah predicts that 2020 and 2021 isn't anywhere near as crazy as she expects it to be in 2024 to 2027. Now that I think was a bit of a theme of the conversation. So what's going on now? What are your thoughts now that we're close to another 2 years in? What's occurring for you now?
Yeah, I still feel exactly the same. Actually, I feel like this year, 2023, we're going to get a bit of a reprieve, I feel, energetically. It feels like it's going to be a pretty expansive year for most people. And I think really what's happening is we're being given a preview of what life's going to be like after 2027. I still think 2024 to 2026 and into 27 are going to be rough years.
So what do you think is any predictions on what actually is going to happen? Or is it just going to be more lockdowns and more of the same nonsense?
Well, I think we will actually see probably in 2023 some more power plays happening on the global stage, whether that is that we see some kind of new pandemic or we see some kind of other control mechanism. I'm actually feeling like 2023, it may be more more financial related.
Yeah.
Kind of the control and the manipulation that we see, because we are having this kind of deconstruction of our financial systems and structures. And we've certainly seen that over the last year with all of the ups and downs in markets and crypto and all of that. Yeah.
Well, no doubt we'll circle back to some of that. But what's different for you now in terms of what you're working on? I mean, you've always been focused on you've always been talking about finance and wealth, etc. But last time I think you were the Wealth Witch, and I think you've done a bit of a rebrand. Like, why the rebrand, and what are you doing differently now?
Yeah. So yeah, the Wealth Witch brand has been with me for a long time. It was actually something that somebody gave to me. I didn't choose it. My community kind of dubbed me the Wealth Witch, and then it stuck.
Yeah.
And I did retire that brand this year, and I'm really excited about that. I think really I have been hiding behind that brand a little bit the last couple of years, and playing a little smaller than probably I should be. And I think it's just felt like it's really time for me to kind of step out on my own without sort of this alter ego.
Yeah.
And I think, that brand was very, very focused on helping people deconstruct financial slavery consciousness. And now I'm really, really focused on helping people build holistic wealth, in all areas of their lives. And so that's really my focus in 2023 and beyond.
So what was interesting about last time is that you are using, why were you called the witch? Because you're using, you're tapping into some kind of energetic field to, you get readings on, that's why you're predicting that things are going to happen in 2024 and beyond. I'm assuming that hasn't gone away just because you've, rebranded yourself a little bit. So is that still a major piece of how you actually work with people?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that will ever go away. That's just something that I've always had my whole entire life. I read energy, and I read timeline energy specifically. And what I see is pockets and places of density. Okay. And that kind of tells me when we're going to experience different things that we've experienced. And that is how I've made my very accurate predictions since 2017. So, that is absolutely still the same. And I use that to help me craft whatever offers and things that I'm putting out into the world. And right now it really feels like the important thing for humanity right now is really beginning to look at wealth holistically.
Yeah. So explain why, because in a lot of the things that I see from people that have some ability maybe to see what's going to, happen in the future, I agree with the idea that I think we're going to go through a lot more shit, and I do have an optimistic view of what the world could be. I don't know what your exact kind of vision is of what the world could look like, but a lot of people talk about a world where we don't need money. And is that something that you see? And if so, why is wealth the vehicle to a betterment of humanity?
Yeah. So I think right now, really what we need to begin doing is shifting our view of what wealth is, particularly wealth and money as currency. And we need to begin to shift that to wealth and currency as resource-based.
Okay.
So, and I think that is, once we go through all of this deconstruction and this transition that is upon us and has been upon us for the last several years and will continue to be upon us, I think, for several years, I think we're really going to move out of a currency, whether that's digital or fiat based model, into more of a resource based model.
Yeah.
And I think that the more people can begin doing that right now, the easier it's going to be to pivot as we experience some of these things that are coming for the collective, and the more we're actually going to be able to thrive during these times of chaos, because we'll be able to pivot.
Yep.
We'll be able to look at things from with a different lens.
So, what should wealth look like for people in terms of? I mean, most people's understanding or value on wealth is, all right, let me make money so I can buy things and I can buy nice things and I can have security for my future and my family and all of that. Is that not valid? Or?
I mean, I think that many people still look at it that way. For me, I think that probably the most important thing that we can do right now is diversify our assets. And, not be dependent upon one form of asset or one form of perceived wealth.
Yeah.
And so I think, holding multiple currencies, I think having multiple currencies in multiple places, I think having financial resources and assets in things like precious metals and gemstones, and, property certainly. But I think that
so it's not just about diversifying and having multiple streams of income, because most people would just be like, okay, I've got multiple streams of money coming in. Mm-hmm. So it's thinking outside of that paradigm into different assets, Yeah,
I mean, I think that a lot of people still are putting all their eggs in one financial basket. And if all of a sudden your bank went away tomorrow that holds, 90% of all of your accumulated wealth and your mortgage and your, whatever else, like what would happen and where would you be? And I think that's really what we need to begin looking at and thinking about as we move into the next several years.
So did you have any insights onto what exactly might unfold with the financial systems, the economies, banking systems? Obviously there's this massive tug of wars. People see the value in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, etc. But there's obviously a lot of pushback from governments, and governments are creating their own. What do you see unfolding?
Well, and I think we maybe talked a little bit about this last time.
Yeah.
I don't believe that we have seen the crypto or digital currency that will prevail once we move through this deconstruction phase. I don't think it's Bitcoin. I don't think it's anything that's out there currently. I think that, even over recent months, we've begun to see incredible pushback from governments and financial institutions and organizations on...
And the exchanges falling apart, et cetera, yeah.
Right. And, and part of that, I think, is control and manipulation to say, see, it's not stable. See, you shouldn't be putting your money there.
Yeah.
And I think we talked a little bit about this as well. Like, I'm not a big investor in cryptocurrency. I feel it's incredibly emotionally volatile, and I don't feel like it's very stable. And so for me, it's not where I choose to invest or put my resources.
Yeah.
I have great friends who have made multiple seven figures in cryptocurrency.
Yeah. But they were riding the wave of the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And, the people that I know that have been successful are people that are really able to control their emotional impulses.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of the world is not that. And especially with the level of control and manipulation that's happening to us right now to keep us in those heightened emotional fear states and that lack and that scarcity. So I think we'll continue to see that. I do think that we'll see a kind of global rollout of governments with their own, trying to push their own digital currency. I think that will likely not be very successful. I think it's going to be very difficult to get the majority of people over into those types of digital currency systems. But we're already seeing so many things fall away. I was just thinking about our generation, we wrote checks for things.
Yeah.
I don't think people even have checkbooks anymore, So even though for us, it may seem like things are slowly changing, they've actually shifted and changed quite rapidly over the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And even, if you think of how banking works, like you used to have to go to the bank, line up, go get your money. And things have changed a lot. But I think, people, forget what has actually changed over a period of decades.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with everything that's happened in the last couple of years, there's been more and more things come out. One of the things I've probably noticed since we spoke last time, just a lot of the woke culture stuff. That's just, I know it is fed by the media. That's definitely fed by the media. What's your take on all of that? Like, what's your favorite? What's the thing that gets your
I'm
you going?
So frustrated by the whole thing just overall. I think that I really feel like humanity has just played into this huge manipulation. It's division tactics. It's, turning on your neighbor. And it's like the Spanish Inquisition all over again. And it's just, whether this is politically correct or that's not. One of the things that I truly believe, and I'm American, so, I believe that we're about to see the fall of a quote unquote great nation here shortly.
Really?
And if, you look at other great nations that have fell, prior to the United States, similar things were happening.
Yeah.
Similar things were happening in their culture. Similar things were happening amongst their population. And I think that right now, I think we're going to see a return to more traditional values and a real backlash against woke culture. I think it's coming really shortly. And I think that we're going to begin to see more of it even in 2023 and certainly in 2024 in the US elections. Like there's going to be massive pushback.
Yeah. I think if you remove the media altogether, like it's such a small minority. And if you think of just how driven it is by the media, like it's the media that lights the fire under those people that makes them angry and they want to go and fight everybody. And if you take away the media, like it's not even a thing. It's like it's just a couple of people acting childish.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, when people look at the United States from the outside, the media is driven by liberal states, and that's not the majority of the United States. That is small select areas where the media happens to be based, and so it's very easy to control and manipulate perception of what it's actually like when that's not necessarily the reality.
And the way that they put that into the media is from the outside and the rest of the world, it's like, well, that's how all of America is, or that's how all of Australia is. It's like, no, it's not like that at all. So what should people be doing for 2023? Like, where should people's attentions be What should be their focus in 2023?
So I've been saying this for a few years, and I still believe absolutely like the best thing that we can do is open up as many revenue streams as possible, turn on as many taps as possible. I think that, like we talked about, not all your eggs in one financial basket as far as where you're keeping your money. Also, not all your eggs in one basket of how you're earning your money.
Yeah.
And this was a big lesson for me actually this year. Really began to feel the impact of the global recession in my business, and had been putting so much attention and so much focus in one area. Like I really had some aha moments this year about really needing to diversify where my money's coming from.
Yeah.
So I think that any time that we can open up an additional stream of revenue, whether that's bringing in $500 a month or $1,000 a month, if you can open up 2 or 3 of those, I think you're going to be in a really good position once we start to see some of this deconstruction happen in 2024.
Yeah. So you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you work mostly with women?
Yeah, primarily.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what is it that you're teaching women that is different to what men should know or learn? Like, are you teaching something specific just for women, or is it just for everybody? Or
no, I think it's for everybody. I just happen to, women are attracted to me. I think like they have resonance with me. And so, you know, I do have male clients certainly, but they're a very small minority. You know, I am a firm believer though that properly resourced women change the world. Women are very tribal beings by nature. They are typically looking out for not only their family, but their tribe and their community and the collective. There's some interesting statistics and figures in the UN when they invest money with women versus when they invest money with men.
Yeah.
And so I think that
men lose the money and the women's money grows.
So for every dollar, women will make 12.
Yeah.
And for every dollar given to men, they will lose 3.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, it's a difference in how we spend. It's a difference in how we save. It's a difference in how we invest. So I'm passionate about helping women become properly resourced, because I know that when they're properly resourced, they leave a legacy of choice and change for not only their children, but our future generations. Yeah.
Here's a bit of a side topic, but I agree with you 100%. But how do you communicate? How do you make it so that what you're educating women on in making money, how do they remain balanced in their feminine and not overcompensate with, you know, being so overly driven, which is, you know, a masculine trait. Like, I'm going to make money, I'm going to break down walls. And how do you communicate that? Like, is that
I don't know. I'm the best person to ask that, right? I mean, you know, I think that this last year I've been reflecting a lot on masculine, feminine, dynamic, polarity, all of that. And I feel like I'm not so convinced of this spiritual, woke, masculine, feminine thing. Okay. I think that we all have masculine, feminine energies inside of us. And I think that some women are, you know, and I don't even know if we should be using the terms masculine, feminine. Maybe we should be using terms like yin and yang. Yep. So I'm a very yang dominant woman. I have a lot of yang energy. I'm a go-getter. I'm a hard worker. I'm disciplined. I'm consistent. I am definitely yang dominant. And I've been judged a lot for that, particularly in the spiritual community. Yeah. You know, you need to tap more into your feminine. You need to be more embodied. You need to do this. You need to do that. And, you know, I'm not sure that that's actually the reality. And I am very fortunate to be surrounded by so many different types of women that are making lots of money in the world. And some of them are very feminine and very embodied in that, you know, deeply yin way. And some of them are very yang. You know, several of my closest friends, and a lot of us are very yang dominant. And I think that, like, letting go of that shame, or that you should act like this or you should act like that, I think if we all just show up and are who we are and do the best that we can do by ourselves and by our families and by our community and by our collective, that's going to be a lot better for us and where we're going, versus, like, you know, trying to make ourselves something that we're not. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tricky conversation. because I mean, I agree with the concept that, probably since the 1960s, like there's, with the rise of feminism and, we've been through these different cycles. And I think where, especially where Western cultures are at, societies are at now, is there is an imbalance between masculine and feminine, and people are confused. Everybody's confused. And it's not to say that one way is right or one way is wrong and you should be like this and, anybody should be like anything. But as a collective, I think there's a lot of confusion, and men don't know how to show up. And because men don't know how to show up, then women don't know how to respond. And, there's a lot of kind of confusion. And, there is always a lot of conversation and topic around overly masculine and driven women. And I agree. I don't think that that's necessarily, I think there is a way that you can have both. Like you can be driven, you can make money, you can do these things. That's not necessarily a masculine thing to go and make money. It's, but you're certainly, on the same token, there's a lot of men who are overcompensating and acting very feminine.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is an unpopular belief in the spiritual community as well, but I think feminism was one of the worst things that happened to masculine feminine dynamics, male female dynamics. And I think it's a lot of the reason why we're in the situation that we're in right now. Personally, what I see is masculinity, whatever it is, whether it's a woman expressing masculine traits or it's a man expressing masculine traits, like we've created a bit of a masculinity's wrong type of a collective. And because of that, we are in the situation that we're in right now because we don't have a large percentage of very strong men who are leading the collective. We've got men that are either emasculated or feeling like they need to be more feminine. So what do we have? We have a collective that I think is very confused about gender roles and the role that actually plays in having a successful, sustainable society. And I think that's one of the big problems that we're facing right now. How
much of that problem is engineered on purpose?
Oh, a lot of it. I think a lot of it. Because again, when we take the strength out of our communities, when we take that strong masculine presence out of our communities, then everyone becomes scared. And so
everybody can be controlled.
Yeah. And then the more emotionally charged we are, the more scared we are, the easier we are to manipulate, the easier we are to control.
Yeah. So you probably have similar beliefs as I do in terms of, there are people in power with agendas to engineer what society potentially looks like. Now, at the end of the day, that's all about control and greed. And what I wonder, though, is like, what is the potential end game for these people? We'll call them elites. Like, you can throw any kind of terms around. But what is the end game? Because if societies fall apart because everybody's weak and everybody's confused, and what's the actual benefit to that? What's the end game for them?
Well, I think that there are a collection of people that are attempting to orchestrate the downfall of our current society because they believe that it's weak. And so it's
like a reset kind of thing.
Make us as weak as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yep.
I would go so far as to say that some of those people are planning on repopulating with a certain genome or specific type of human being in mind. And it's interesting because I was just talking to somebody about this the other day where I was saying, like, it used to be natural selection. We lived based on natural selection. And as a result of that, only the strongest of us survived. So what we're seeing right now is orchestrated natural selection. And the perceived weakest of us are being taken out.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can just look at what happened with this whole pandemic and the vaccines and all of that to see, who decided to take it, who didn't, what's happening now, and I think we're only seeing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll actually see the ramifications of what happened during all of this.
Yeah. So all that being said, one of the things that you talk about is the new Earth, the new world. What do you see that potentially looks like? Decades from now or whenever.
Well, I mean, it's
like, for your children and your grandchildren, what does the world look like?
Oh God. Well, I think that what I would hope would happen, I really would like to just get this over as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Like I would, my partner and I have been laughing lately. He's like, they should just turn out all the electricity for 3 months.
Yeah. Well,
because then see what happens.
There's a lot of talk about that.
But then from that's natural selection. Only the strongest will survive. Masculine, feminine dynamics and gender roles will quickly go back to what they used to be, right? Yeah. So, for me, I don't think we're going to be lucky enough to have that happen. I think that could be, I don't think that we'll see that.
Yeah.
We may see periods of like internet blackout. We may see periods of like online banking systems go down and things like that. But ultimately, I think it's a slower rollout. Yeah. And I think it's been actually happening for some time. We're just actually now, I think, at the kind of apex of it. I think this has been happening for generations. I would say actually since the feminist movement, like that was the beginning of some orchestration of some of the stuff that we're seeing play out right now. But I think that, and I never talk about this stuff, so I'm sure I'm going to get all this hate mail now after this, but it is what it is.
That's right. Nobody watches the show. It's all good.
It's what I believe. Yeah, I think that we will. I think there is a reset of some sort happening, and I hope that it doesn't get dragged out for generations. Like it'd be really great, I think, if we could just get into this and get it over with in the next 5 to 10 years. Rip the Band-Aid off, and then see what happens, and let us come back and start putting things back together and picking up the pieces, because there's a lot that we're not doing right. I mean, I think, being here in Indonesia, we see a different kind of life. We see a different kind of tribal community living that in many ways works so much better than our Western civilizations. Yeah. So I would like to see us get back to more of that tribal communal living and supporting each other instead of trying to tear each other down and trying to attack each other. And I think that, experiencing more traditional roles in family units and in communities is probably the very best thing for our children right now and for our future generations. Yeah.
In everything. So especially the way that we grow our food and everything. I feel way safer here in Bali because, I got Balinese friends who I just know if everything just shut down, it's like, I'm just going to go stay with them, and they're in the rice fields, and, they're going to have it way more figured out than the rest of it. I feel bad for people who are living in these giant cities and skyscrapers. And if that all switches off, it's like this, where do you go? What do you do? So I've never been much of a doomsday prepper or any of this. Maybe I'm naively optimistic about the way the world is, but just in recent times, I've been paying way more attention. Mm-hmm. And I've got some people around me who are actually, a little bit careful and a little bit kind of tapped in. And we have, started kind of planning and preparing, not that we think anything's going to happen, but having a generator, having extra fuel. Like this building here, Lighthouse, we've got a massive generator, and I've already started thinking, what would I need to have here? Like, what would be I don't think we would go offline for months on end. Yeah. I think, I don't know, maybe a week, or I actually think something's coming where electricity or internet or something's going to get switched off for a week or two. I don't know if it's going to get switched off or what's going to happen. I don't know what the source or the cause is, but I'm just hearing it too much from too many people now, and I'm not worried about it. I'm not scared about it. I'm very grateful for the childhood that I had. Like, I kind of had to, I was running around in bare feet, and I grew up on a boat, and I washed in a bucket, didn't have a shower, didn't have a TV, and I think I'm probably better prepared than than a lot of people mentally, physically, with what my grandfather taught me about tying knots, and I've got, Swiss Army knives, and I've got all of this, so yeah. I think I'm better prepared than most people, but I think something is coming.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, if we simply look to the wealthy and the rich and we look at what they're doing, it's very easy to tell and predict what's coming.
Yeah.
So, I have friends that are millionaires, multimillionaires in the United States, and they are all prepping. They are building bunkers.
The bunker business in the USA is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like one of the biggest property booms is underground bunkers. Yeah. It's crazy.
And anyone that I know that has a significant amount of wealth is preparing for what's coming.
Yep.
And that's not, of course, they're not going to tell you that on the news. The media isn't going to let you know that. But if you run in those types of circles and those types of people, they have 29 bank accounts in different countries.
Yeah.
They have assets in different places, and they are absolutely building bunkers and prepping and have years of food supply.
Yeah.
And are they doing it because they absolutely know something is coming, or are they doing it because they're going to be prepared for if and when something does?
Yeah. And I mean, my theory around it is, rather than being naively optimistic and figuring it out when it happens, is why not? Like, why not just be?
What's it going to hurt?
Why not just be prepared? So, because you work mostly with women, what should women be doing? Do you think, to women especially? How should women be showing up, like in these years to come, to better prepare? You've mentioned about the wealth and diversifying, but how should women show up, in their character and?
Well, oh, wow, that's a loaded question. I really feel like, again, I think a return to traditional values is actually really important.
Yeah.
And to really begin to look at, like, what have we created? Like, what have we created in our search for independence, and in our search for sexual liberation, and in our search for, all of these things that we believed were liberating us? Like, really, if all of this goes away, and we go back to living a very tribal, even if it's for a period of time, like, what values do you need to have? Well, to me, I'm like, we need to be focused on our tribe and on our community and on our children and on the thriving and the raising of strong children with solid morals and solid values, and those being really, community and tribal based. And I think that, I mean, we've been in this kind of place of which, I begin to wonder also, is this all orchestrated, the spiritual growth and ascension, and, stepping into different types of living in communities where, sexual freedom and liberation is what's being focused on instead of traditional family values. Yeah.
But that they're usually run by a couple of horny men.
Well, that's true as well, right? But I think that, for women, I think that, and anyone that, I'm working with, I really feel like it's important for us to really look at, like, what are we modeling for our future generations? And if you have children, what is the life that you want your daughter to have? What is the life that you want your son to have? What kind of men are you raising? What kind of women are you raising? And we can't raise those types of men and women unless we're modeling it ourselves.
Yeah. I think, with the last probably 3, maybe 4 generations, there's just been such a focus on, creating wealth, and the measure of success of our children is, the school that they went to, and, how many extracurricular classes they're doing, and, how they compare to the neighbors, and, keeping up with the Joneses. That's what it's all been about. But just living here in Bali, you get the opportunity to see kids who are actually really connected to nature. And I think when you just have the ability to have somebody so young and small, be so connected to nature, and have some reverence for, being connected in that way. There's so many other things that develop. It doesn't take away that, wanting to go and be an entrepreneur or being an engineer or making money. It doesn't take away from that. But I think the way that they go about their life, they're far better prepared. Yeah. So I think if we can do anything, it's like, how do we connect back to nature? Because so many things just unfold off the back of that. Yeah. Yeah. So, even if you're living in a big city, what do these massive cities of 10, 20 million people have to do to bring it back to like this village life that we're
that's going to be hard, right?
Yeah, that's really hard.
I think that's the last place you want to be over the next few years, is in a highly populated, densely populated concrete jungle. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are feeling that. And that's why you see a lot of people moving, especially in the United States, moving out of big cities into small towns.
Yeah. So do you consider, the work that you do, and I asked you right from the start, you're kind of tapped into, energies and seeing the future, and you use astrology and all these different kind of things. To the average person, you could say, she's a spiritual human. She's spiritual. She's tapped in. But how do you, a lot of people who get stuck in a spiritual vortex and they kind of get lost and they lose themselves and they just want to be part of nature, and, they don't seem to then add any value to anything. So how do you navigate that? Well, I think personally, how do you navigate that? And then how do you teach other people to be tapped into that? Like I'm assuming that you're teaching people to connect with their intuition and all these things. Like that's part of what you're working with people on. So how do they do that and not get lost in the vortex?
Yeah. I think like I'm definitely a spiritual realist. And for me, like my spiritual growth has been really, really important and such a rewarding part of my life. But at the same time, like we are living a 3D human experience. Yeah. And so we have to be informed about that, and we have to actually like stay grounded and stay connected to the reality of what we're facing day to day. Yeah. And I think that, having a spiritual nature or having a spiritual side of us or being connected to God, source, universe, all that is the highest level version of ourselves, our higher self, whatever you want to call it, it makes that 3D life so much more rewarding. And, when we are connected and we are in tune energetically with what's going on around us, even what you were just talking about with kids and nature, when we're connected to this planet and to the energies of, the oneness of all of us being connected and all of us being connected to the planet, I think it makes those day-to-day decisions and that day-to-day life a lot more rewarding and a lot more fulfilling. And I think that, obviously the more in tune I think we are, the more connected we are, the easier it is for us to follow our North Star, our compass, or the reason why we're here, and do our purpose work in the world and do our purpose work for the betterment of our collective and of humanity. And so, I think that, a healthy balance of that is really important. Yeah. And I get frustrated sometimes in Bali because I feel like there's a lot of spiritual seeking and not a lot of practical life living.
Yeah, I think there's also just an over-exaggeration of the communication and around spirituality. It's like the most spiritual people I know are the ones that you wouldn't even know. They don't call themselves spiritual. They're just, you can tell that they're connected to nature and they're doing their thing, and but they don't need to go around saying, "Hey, I'm spiritual. Look at me." Yeah, it's like that's not what spiritual is. Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't the case that the Native American Indian tribes are out there calling themselves spirit. Hey, look at us, we're spiritual. Yeah. It's like, no, they're just living their lives. That's just how they live their lives. They don't need to define themselves in any such way. Yeah. But I also think that people are trying to find their way in this world, and that's kind of like that's the way in. Like people come to Bali for their eat, pray, love experience, and then it opens up a door, and then they start seeking more and start finding their way. And unfortunately, some people get lost in there. But yeah, I think I'm hopeful for the world being opened up in that way. But I also think that something like COVID has opened doors for a lot of people, because it's made them really question, what they were doing before. Look how, trapped I was without even knowing I was trapped. I was working in this job and, just chasing money for 15 years, and I wasn't focused on, I had this vision for myself, and I just got lost. That's why I kind of also wonder, like you, maybe we should just rip the Band-Aid off. Maybe something big should just happen, and then, not that I want anything bad to happen to people and people, suffer even more, but I think so much good could come of just dismantling, many things.
It's an interesting question, right? Because it's like, oh, do we rip the Band-Aid off and then have a shorter period of intense struggle?
Yeah.
Or are we just prolonging this, long drawn out struggle?
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to answer that. If I got a vote, my vote would be rip the Band-Aid off, But,
yeah. And it is hard, because it's like, hey, I've built this, like, this beautiful place here, and I've put a lot of work and a lot of money into it. And it's like, okay, well, what happens if the world shuts down? What's going to happen to me in this business? And I got selfish thoughts around it. But I also have the belief that everything's going to work out the way that it should. And I think it's called Lighthouse for a reason as well. I think maybe something in those dark times, it could be, it could be something important, so yeah. Who knows? You mentioned about purpose. So first of all, like, how do you articulate your purpose? Is this something that you are very, very clear on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for many, many years, I think my purpose is to emancipate people from all types of slavery.
Yeah.
And I think that, the most powerful slavery is the slavery of our mind, and where we keep ourselves trapped and imprisoned. And so, I'm a big fan of emotional clearing work and doing work with our stuck and stagnant emotional pathology that we store in the organs and meridian systems of the body. But, and I really feel like my legacy is to empower women to create a legacy of choice and freedom. And I think, I do that by helping more women become properly resourced, so that they can create choice for their children and for our future generations. I think that really is the raising kids that, are mentally strong, raising kids that are sure of themselves, raising kids that are empowered to think for themselves and make their own decisions and know and believe that they have choice, and that they have the ability to be great and to do great things in the world. That really, I think, is my purpose, and helping women to foster those environments for our future generations.
In whatever way that looks like for them.
Yep.
Well, the reason I asked the question is, yes, I'm curious about how you articulate it, but also probably how you answer that question 2 years ago would have been very different. And I think a lot of people get really lost in this idea of needing to know what their purpose is. And actually people like get so lost in it that it actually becomes a real problem, and it becomes paralyzing almost. And then they rather than pursuing something, not necessarily knowing what it's going to look like, they're not taking any actions, because they're trying to figure out exactly what their purpose is before taking any actions. Which to me, I think, purpose. The purpose of my life is to continue seeking my purpose. Like, it's just never going to end. It's just constantly evolving. So I'm assuming that that's something that comes up with you and, the people that you work with as a very common kind of conversation, right?
Yeah. And I actually love what you just said, because that to me is the key piece, is that it's always evolving.
Yeah.
As we step into the expanded next level versions of ourselves, more doors open up, more ideas open up, our lens shifts. We begin to see things differently. And so, it's not just this one thing. It's never going to be this one thing, especially if you're on a journey of spiritual growth and expansion. It's always going to be changing. And so I'm frequently telling people, just go do the thing. You can't wait. You can't wait to know exactly what it's going to be, because I don't think you ever know that.
Yeah.
I can sit here today and say oh, this is what fuels me. This is what inspires me. This is what gets me going in the morning. This is how I continue to show up and do the work that I do in the world today. Tomorrow, it might be entirely different. The lights might go out tomorrow. My purpose might shift dramatically, So I think we have to just, it is seeking that purpose at some level, but not seeking it to the point that you're paralyzed or you're not doing anything.
Yeah. And I think it's a very subtle, unconscious strategy of the mind, to not take action and procrastinate. And, it's a self-sabotage mechanism, really.
Yeah.
One of the sayings that I like is that it's easier to, it's actually better to action your way into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of acting. And I think so many people are trying to figure out their purpose and then I've got to work on my mindset before I go and do this. I've got to, I've got to heal myself of this. If I look at my journey, yes, I've done, so many of the healing modalities, and I've sat in ceremonies and done all these things, but just the journey of just taking action, just getting on the court and playing the game.
Yeah.
The learning comes through that. That's where the juice is.
Yeah. Well, my dear friend Taryn, who always says that she feels like being an entrepreneur has been the most transformative spiritual journey of her life.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, because to be an entrepreneur, you have to face your deepest, darkest shadows. You have to pick yourself up over and over and over again. And so, I just, to me, it's it's always it's all of it. It's the journeying, it's the ceremony, it's the plant medicine, it's all the things, right? But to me, I never want to do that to the detriment of not being able to act and not being able to actually go out and impact the world. And I think that each and every one of us is here to do that in our own way. And we can't do that in a teepee,
Yeah, I think the mind wants to compartmentalize the healing being different to, what actions should I take? And, so many, when we're talking about purpose, people put their purpose in some kind of vehicle, their purpose is their career. It's their business. It's the thing that it's not that. The purpose is just continually showing up and figuring out the next step. And, I think if people can do that, they can just give themselves permission to get over your shit and just start playing the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So what are some of your some of your practices and habits and disciplines and things that you do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to keep yourself grounded and not lose your shit?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I'm better at that than others.
I'm pretty, we all lose our shit. So.
Well, I'm a big journaling fan. That for me, I have found is probably my, I've done all the things as well. I've done all the ceremonies and all the plant medicine and all the spiritual journeys and all the emotional clearing and all the things.
Just sorry, is the plant medicine stuff, is that something that you actually recommend people do, or is that just let people find that for themselves, or do you actually be this is something you should maybe look at?
I think plant medicine is a very individual journey, and I would never recommend it to anyone. Yep. I think for me, all the plant medicine that I've done, it found me at certain times in my life, and it was absolutely right and appropriate for me in that time.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of damage done from people that are in that constant seeking of that, or feeling like they're doing it because everybody else is doing it.
Yep.
So I feel like it's something that needs to call to you individually. Yeah. And I think you'll know. I mean, I've known every single time. It's been this is absolutely, it's your time. It's time for you to do this. It's time for this journey.
That's been true for me also, except for one time when I went to support a friend, and I got absolutely flogged. Like, I mean, I got absolutely flogged. I was sick, and it was horrible. It was a horrible experience, and that's the only time, because I felt like I wasn't called to it, but I had to show up for my friend, and it's like, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah.
That's not gonna fly.
Yeah. It's
so
interesting.
I don't know. I've cut you off and gone sideways, but what plant medicine journeys have you done?
So I have done peyote, and had a kind of a several month long journey with peyote. I've done a lot of Cambo. I've done some mushroom ceremonies. I was called to Bufo at one point, but I didn't end up doing it. And now I'm like, it's a hard no for me.
Okay.
And I have never been called to ayahuasca. So
Really?
I have had so many people be like, oh, you should do ayahuasca. You should do ayahuasca. And for me, it's just been a hard no. And I've done San Pedro. Yeah. San Pedro.
I haven't done that. I was 100% called to ayahuasca, not like in a subtle way. Like, I was having dreams and flashbacks and all sorts of crazy things going on. Like, I was fully called to it. Yeah.
I mean,
and I ended up
right?
going to Peru and doing it there, and it was like, it was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah.
like when peyote showed up in my life, it was like I didn't seek it out.
Yeah.
It found me.
Yeah.
And it was powerful, and it was intense, I think I'm still recovering from that at some level. This year for me was a highly deconstructive, really difficult year after a year of kind of journeying and some pretty intense plant medicine ceremonies. I think you have to be prepared for the come apart.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people aren't, and I'm a real, like, I can keep my shit together. I can go do the things. And this year has been a little brutal for me.
Yeah.
On the heels of a lot of deconstruction work that I did.
Yeah. It's worth it though.
Yeah.
It's so worth it.
Yeah. I don't regret any of the journeys that I've done.
Yeah.
I learned so much about myself. I continue to learn about myself. And I think, they're beautiful vehicles of self-exploration and self-discovery.
Yeah. By the way, we're not selling.
No.
This is not a sell. However, if you are interested and curious about doing it, my recommendation to people is, if they're going to do something, like, seek out something that is really pure. Like, I really hate the idea of people doing ayahuasca in their apartments in New York City. Like, that to me is just like, that's fucking stupid. Yeah. I went to Peru. I did it in the jungle with a shaman, his father and grandfather and great grandfather, that were shamans, and it was like, it was very pure. And I lucked out, but that's the thing. When people ask me for advice, I'm like, seek that out. Like, I'm not sure who you've done peyote with, but who I've done it with. They're legit. That's in their ancestry, and it was proper. It was proper. So I don't think, it's not like going to the beach and taking mushrooms with your friends. It's like fully take that seriously, and don't fuck around with it. Like really treat it with respect.
Yeah. And I think these peak experiences, the other thing though that I just want to say is that I believe you can have these peak experiences not on plant medicine.
Yeah.
Like, those experiences are available to you.
Yep.
If we are seeking, and I think that, part of the purpose seeking, or a lot of the spiritual seeking, is we find people trying to look outside of self for the answers.
Yep.
And the real beauty of most plant medicine is it brings you inward. Like, it's not an external seeking. It's who am I? It's a deep understanding of who you are on a multi-dimensional level.
And sometimes that does not look pretty.
Yeah, exactly. But I believe that you can have these peak experiences from other things. You can do it from, meditation.
Breath work.
Yeah. Like, people talk about Satori experiences all the time that are outside of plant medicine. And so, if that's not calling you, there's lots of ways to have those types of experiences and still get the same incredible benefits of, knowing yourself at a much deeper, expanded level.
Yeah. So before I cut you off, you were saying plant medicine is one of the things that you've done, one of the vehicles, but Yeah. What are the other things that you do on a regular basis?
Yeah. I journal.
Yep.
For me, that has just been
What do you think it is about journaling that helps?
So for me, it's bringing my thoughts and my feelings and everything kind of into a place of alignment.
Yeah.
It really enables me to connect with myself, like the highest level version of myself. And it's just one of those things that for me, like I was given by a mentor a 90-day journaling challenge. I haven't always been a journaler. And she was like, do it for 90 days. And if it doesn't change your life, you never have to do it again. And after 30 days, my life was completely changed. And so it works. So I do it. And I meditate. I do lots of different.
You meditate every day
or meditation? I meditate in some way every day, but I go through phases. I go through phases of like Joe Dispenza meditation, for example. I'll do 30 days or 90 days of Joe Dispenza meditation. What else do I do? To me, a lot of how I connect is just in those quiet moments of reflection.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be to me like, oh, I have to sit down and have 15 minutes to do this. It can actually just be all right, I've got a couple minutes. I need to really check in and what's going on.
I think pondering is underrated.
Yeah.
Completely underrated. I had an insight years ago where I would catch myself like staring at the wall and I'd like snap out of it after 20 minutes or like 40 minutes. I'm like, fuck, I've been staring at the wall and like I've been pondering. I'm like, there's stuff going on. And then I would beat myself up about it. I was like, fuck, get back to work, like get back to the grind, get back to the hustle. And it's like, you're wasting time. And then after a conversation with somebody who I consider to be a mentor, it made me realize that like that's where I was getting my power from. Like that staring at the wall for 30 minutes might have resulted in 10 hours of leveraged work for me. Like that's where the juice is. It's bringing moments of mindfulness, but I think pondering is underrated. Like just sit there with a cup of tea and
just allow it to. I think it's fascinating too. I mean, like you're even seeing it in like mainstream television now, like in Suits or like some of these other like we're seeing the high powered professionals.
Yep.
They're showing that like so many of these guys, they take the 10-minute break. They take the 10-minute either silence or meditation or just the allowing themselves the random thoughts, and they do that like quite disciplined throughout their day.
Yep.
So I think it's important.
Yeah. The thing that I try to do is bring a lot of mindfulness to basically every hour. Like just if I try not to get too lost in what I'm doing. It's great to do deep work, but it's also good for me every hour to just stop, breathe, get up, go for a walk, go back to it. So I'm always mindful of how I'm being. What's the state of my body? How am I breathing? All that kind of stuff. So I think the more that you can bring that to just how you run your day, and that could just be like setting your alarm like every hour. Just have some kind of system where for 1 minute every hour you just check in and have a breath.
Yeah.
So so what's your program now? What are you focused on now?
Oh my gosh. Several things in the new year. One is I just relaunched the podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the podcast
no longer
called? The Wealth Witch podcast. We are now House of Wealth with Leah Steele.
Okay.
And I'm excited about that because it really is a lot of the things that we've talked about today. And the premise behind it is, what does your house of wealth look like? And building those firm, strong foundations, and then looking at the different rooms of your house, so whether that's diversified income or the different areas of your life. So I really, I take a real holistic approach to wealth because I don't believe that we can have sustainable financial wealth if we don't have wealth in the other areas of our lives.
Yeah.
So you've got a room of your house that's relationships. You've got a room of your house that's, whether one's maybe your romantic, intimate relationship. You've got another room of your house that's your friendships. You've got another room of your house that's your health. And so for me, it's this season of the podcast is really focusing on all of those areas.
Yep.
And really helping people identify where their not strong, and where they need to focus on to bring those areas of their lives into excellence.
And where's the podcast? It's on, you just have
It's
it on
in all the places.
Spotify, Apple,
Spotify, Apple,
Google.
yeah,
All right.
all the places podcasts are streamed.
Check the link, guys.
Yeah, so that's probably the big focus right now is the relaunch of that. And I have a new framework that I've been downloading called the Golden Codex, which is a really incredible combination of Chinese five-element theory, which is a 4,000 plus year old body of work, combined with the hexagrams, the Chinese hexagrams, which are the basis of human design and gene keys.
Yep.
And then we're also really focused in the framework on 13th sign astrology, which incorporates that 13th constellation of Ophiuchus.
Yeah.
And so really looking at the hexagram placements in our natal charts based upon house and astrological sign of the house. So it's the same stuff we've been talking about. It's that getting to know yourself at a much deeper level.
Cool. You just opened up, you just went down the rabbit hole a little bit for me. You opened up a rabbit hole. The 13th sign. So you used to call yourself the Wealth Witch, and it's really interesting to me if you look back at what happened in probably the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. People who were labeled as being witches were burned at the stake. There was a lot of control put in by the church. The people don't realize. People take it so for granted that they have no idea that there's not 12 months in a year.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea that the calendar is completely fabricated and made up by the church. The Gregorian calendar that we run by was implemented, I think, in 1588 by Pope Gregory the Eighth. That's a bit of a stab, but and from the things that I've read, a lot of it is related to taking out the number 13 from things, right? Mm-hmm. So there's 13 lunar cycles in 1 year, and the number 13 is, considered unlucky and taboo, and that was put in by the church, I believe, as a way of control. People who were witches and with different things, call yourself whatever you want, but they had abilities and they had access to certain things, and it was thought that, the church didn't want that. The church wanted people to follow their thing, and they wanted to be the ones that controlled everything. So you just mentioned about the 13th star sign. Give me a little bit of insight about that.
Yeah, so I really believe that I'm completely on board with everything that you said. One of the things that I really believe is that this 13th sign of Ophiuchus, it changes everything in our astrological, like what we know as far as astrology goes.
Yep.
And 13th sign astrology is a sidereal form of astrology. So it's much closer to, it's sidereal, not tropical, which is 12th sign astrology. Mm-hmm. It's much closer to like a Vedic type of a system. But I really believe that this sign of Ophiuchus, it's been hidden from us. Yes. So Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer.
Yes.
Ophiuchus is Alcipius. And when we look at even how the Alcipius's staff, which is the rod with the serpent, has been confused with the caduceus. There's a lot of hidden information and wisdom, I think, in this 13th sign. I have always been drawn to it because I am an Ophiuchus star sign, and I have a stellium in Ophiuchus.
What's the dates?
So, that's
debatable.
Kind of up for debate, but I'm a December 1st.
Yeah, so I'm December 7.
Okay, so you're Ophiuchus also?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and I have a stellium there as well. So I have 4 planets in that sign. And when I started researching Ophiuchus, so much made sense to me. And I think that, I really truly believe that the serpentine nature of all of our ancient civilizations have been hidden from us. And I believe that that is a way to keep us disempowered. So we've been taught to vilify and fear serpent energy and snakes. But if you look at all of our ancient civilizations, they all came from a myth or a story that relates to the serpent. Yeah. And so I think it's very telling that the serpent bearer was hidden from our astrology. And so the journey that I'm taking people on right now is a deep discovery of those Ophiuchus placements, but also how that impacts the rest of their astrological chart. And it's hard for people that are really like attached to the framework that they've been exposed to or that they've been using. But for me, it's just been really mind-blowing, not only for myself, but for my clients, to really explore this other system and to see how it shifts things.
Yeah. I think as well as how interesting it is, the specifics of what you're saying, I think what's really important is that people actually realize that this whole thing around 12 months a year is completely fucking made up. And why that's important is because you have never questioned the system. You have never questioned anything. And
even when it doesn't make sense, right? Like there's 13 lunar cycles, but we have 12 months.
Yeah. So, and what that is actually doing is disconnecting us from nature. So all these things that, we're talking about is like connecting to nature, etc. And if you had no concept of time and you were just, living on the land and your watch didn't work and your iPhone didn't work, well, what would you be going by? You'd be going by nature. And all of these concepts, whether we know it or not, is keeping us disconnected from nature.
Yeah.
Like just the fact that we call today December 27 is in some ways keeping us disconnected.
Yeah.
And it seems subtle, but everybody goes by it.
Yeah.
Like everybody is controlled to some degree. Now, some people, I think having the awareness of it is the key. Because when you have that awareness of what's actually going on, then you can consider things in a different way. Like you can second guess things. You can question things like, well, why is that system in place? Like if the calendar is made up, well, what else is made up?
Right. And that's the most important thing, right? I think that if we can all just stay in this state of constant curiosity and be willing to ask ourselves, well, if that was a lie, and I have believed that this thing to be true my whole entire life is actually a lie, who would benefit from that?
Yeah.
And if it's somebody that benefits, if it's a government or a financial institution or an organization or a governing body of some kind that benefits ultimately, you better be looking at that.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, those beliefs that we want to dig our heels in and be like, no, there's no way I'm looking at that. That just is. Those are the ones that we really need to question.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many elements of society, the way that, what we're raised into is just made up. I mean, the education system, the medical system, like everything is just made up to profit certain people. That's it. It's not there to serve us. It's there to serve the few.
Yep.
And it's
that's
unfortunate.
Confronting for the collective.
It is. And I think that whole pandemic period has been a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people because people, some of those nonsense things actually, bubble to the surface and people have questioned, people have gone and taken the vaccines, they've gone and got themselves vaccinated and had adverse effects and then gone, well, hang on a second, like what's going on here? And, it has woken up quite a few people.
Yeah.
Not enough. The one that gets me is like how people have had adverse effects and then they're still like advocating for it. Like, oh my God, how
but that's the brainwashing, right?
How brainwashed are you?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, the lesson for today is
question everything.
Question everything. So, Leah, this has been awesome. How can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
I'm at the Leah Steele on all social media.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I think the podcast is just a great place to kind of get to know me and
good stuff.
Hear the things that I'm chatting about.
We will make sure people get the links. So thank you so much for joining. I got one last question. I would have asked this last time. I don't know what you answered last time, but the question for everybody is, if you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy and you could share a message with all 8 billion souls on the planet or whatever the number is now, one short, sharp message that was most potent for you that you could pass on, what would that message be?
I think that that's actually it, that we actually create a legacy of freedom and choice by staying in that state of constant curiosity, by questioning everything, and especially those things that we want to hold on to with that like white knuckle death grip.
Yeah.
Like begin questioning those things, because that is how you create freedom and choice in your life.
Yeah. It just makes me realize just how much curiosity is beaten out of children. You know, it's like you're taught to just follow the system, and I mean, children are just naturally curious about everything, and that at some point gets beaten out of us. So it's like, just how do we keep that alive? Yeah. So I think we've got some work to do for the next generations. Like that's an important thing. Like actually empowering children to question everything.
Yep.
Yeah, because
Indoctrination.
Yeah, exactly. It's so easy for parents to be like, "No, I'm the boss. Don't question me." Yeah. There's a way to let children's curiosity be fostered. So that's awesome. That's very cool, guys. Make sure you go check out Leah, watch her podcast, and we'll see you next time back down the rabbit hole. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks.
See you guys.